The Western nations have been in disarray for months. They are concerned about losing their power in Africa because Europe heavily depends on Africa's wealth. European officials are worried about the ongoing power shift globally, especially in Africa where China's influence is steadily growing and Russia's presence has recently expanded. To maintain their power in Africa, the President of the European Union, Ursula von der Leyen, offered to be a friend to Africa at the Africa Climate Change Summit in Nairobi, Kenya, in September. Unfortunately, this offer was rejected. Let's explore what she offered and why it didn't work. Von der Leyen started by saying that the summit is an important step towards the COP28 meeting, which recently concluded. She emphasized that the summit aims to ensure Africa's voice is heard worldwide and its goals are considered, as Africa is the most affected region by climate change. She stated that she is not only there to listen but also to offer Europe's help at COP28 to work together on the issues at hand. Although Europe and Africa may appear different, they care about the same things when it comes to taking action on climate change. She informed them that she was not just there to listen to African leaders but also to bring Europe's offer to them. It is likely that the West, including France and the UK, has never paid attention to Africa and mainly focused on conveying their own plans and ideas, even in difficult times. They always have deals that mostly favor Europe over other continents. She mentioned that Europe presented itself as a friend to Africa at the recent COP28 meeting in the UAE. However, the question arises, why should Africa be friends with Europe? Over the years, European countries have seen African countries not as friends but as resources to be exploited, like valuable uranium mines. Now, we are expected to believe that what she said represents Europe's true intentions. At this point, I don't think Africans or African politicians are foolish or naive enough to believe them. She claims that Europe is making this effort so that Africans can be heard, but Africa consists of 54 countries and is larger than Europe, with abundant natural and economic resources. If African leaders are struggling to convey their ideas and views on the global stage without Europe's help, which many see as Africa's enemy, it raises doubts about their leadership qualifications. Africa doesn't rely on these countries because it has numerous resources and a wide range of countries. It shouldn't need help from other countries, especially Europe, to have its views heard worldwide. If collaboration is necessary to amplify African opinions, it should come from a source that shares the region's interests and values, rather than Europe, which has a history of exploiting others. She goes on, President Ruto and dear friend, we hear you when you say that Africa's top priority is to grow your economy and get as many people out of poverty as possible. You're so right. Taking action on climate change is part of the solution. Your huge potential for green energy and clean hydrogen, your important raw materials, your beautiful nature and wildlife are all parts of the solution. You can help clean up energy systems and supply lines around the world while also giving people in your country good jobs and economic chances that they deserve. This relationship is good for both Africa and the rest of the world. For example, Africa would gain a lot from developing its clean energy industry because it will speed up the switch to solar and wind power. Africa could add twice as many jobs in the energy field in just a few years. The region could also produce enough clean energy to power itself and sell to other countries. And you can see that African leaders are very interested in tackling climate change, but it's not their main goal. If we look closely, it will become clear that the West is the main cause of today's climate problems. Even though Western countries have been involved in environmental problems in the past, now that they have developed, they want developing countries to focus on fighting climate change instead of economic growth. As already mentioned, the actions of Western countries show that they care more about themselves and don't pay much attention to Africa. This is similar to what Naledi Pandor said earlier this year when she pointed out that developed countries haven't kept their promises to the developing world and instead continue to blame us in Africa. They tell us to do certain things like stop using coal, reduce emissions, and deal with climate change. But these countries have had a lot of time to grow and develop, while we need to catch up quickly to meet their demands. The way Ursula von der Leyen described her suggested win-win partnership seems to benefit Europe more than anyone else. People say that Africa has plenty of resources to address both poverty and climate change. If that's true, why don't we use these resources first to solve these problems in Africa? Why should African resources be used to help others before we take care of our own issues? Why can't the world, especially wealthy European countries, work together to help Africa escape poverty, considering how much Africa has contributed to Europe's growth? Unfortunately, Europe doesn't seem to want that kind of answer. Instead, it seems like Africa is expected to remain poor. One example of this is how abuse often begins with promises of giving money to Africa, but a lot of that money ends up leaving the continent illegally, like when Western companies avoid paying taxes. This takes away from the benefits that were meant for Africa. Now, pay close attention to the next part of her speech. She said, climate action can be one of the main drivers of Africa's growth, but for that, Africa needs massive investment, and Europe wants to be your partner in closing this investment gap. This was to show that Western help and investment in Africa may not be as beneficial as it seems initially. We agree that international development banks need to be changed. Now it's time to take action and not just talk endlessly. It's surprising how they have been talking for years without doing anything. I can tell you one more thing, these comments are just empty words meant to manipulate Africa into giving in. Von der Leyen made her point even stronger by saying that they don't just want resources, they also want to work with Africa to create local value chains and good jobs here. This is important for young people because if African suppliers become better, Europe will rely more on Africa, which is less risky for both economies. But these words also reveal their true intention. The main goal of Europe, as emphasized in her speech, is to keep Africa as a source of cheap materials and resources. Their proposed partnership is about continuing to exploit Africa and focusing on extracting resources. Other goals seem less important and won't receive attention as long as Europe can easily get resources from Africa at a low cost. Europe can't truly help Africa if they maintain this exploitative approach. If there's a real partnership, Africa should have a say in setting the rules, not Europe. It's easy for countries like China, Russia, and others to challenge what the European Union thinks it can offer Africa. Von der Leyen's speech and recent actions by European countries show that Europe heavily relies on the wealth that comes from Africa. What do you think about this? Let us know in the comments. Thank you for watching. Like, share, follow, and turn on the notification bell if you want to see more videos like this and be informed when we upload new ones.